Welcome back to the Less Stress in Life podcast. Today we're talking about your nervous system, but not in a textbook way. We're going to talk about what your body is trying to tell you when it sends pain signals and how to respond in a way that helps instead of making things worse. Good morning, Lindsay Vertalka, co-host. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be back and talking about the nervous system. We're going to nerd
Well,
out a little.
chronic pain, it is your jam.
Yeah, it is. And we're going to nerd out a little bit today.
Okay. So, why don't we start with defining what chronic pain is?
So, chronic pain is generally uh, pain that lasts more than 6 months. And I mean, it can be episodic, it can flare, it can get worse and get better, but it it it's there as kind of a long term.
Chronic pain has an opposite, and that is acute. So, acute pain is the stuff that's short duration. Can you give us an example of the difference between chronic pain and acute pain?
For sure. As an example, if you are stepping down a curb and sprain your ankle, you might have sudden sharp pain in that ankle, have swelling, bruising, use crutches for a short period, and have pain. And then eventually with time, maybe within a month or two, it starts to feel better. Sometimes it's sooner. If you have pain and symptoms, difficulty walking that lasts for a lot longer than that, when we start to think about, kind of what's going on? Why is there still pain? Because tissues are healed by about 6 months. So sometimes it can be what I say is more of a nervous system issue than a tissue issue. Ooh.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. What do you mean by a nervous system issue?
Yeah, so the nervous system is very complex. Your nervous system composes three parts, and the first one is your brain. If you think of your brain as a control center, the brain's constantly getting information, you're making decisions using your brain, and the brain sends messages back to the body. The second part of your nervous system is your spinal cord, and that is like a highway. Think of it as a highway, and it carries messages back and forth between your brain and the rest of your body. And the third part of the nervous system is basically the nerves. And we have, I think it's over 45 miles of nerves in our body. And think of it as multiple roads and highways. And nerves give your brain information about pain, about temperature when something is cold or hot. Uh, it nerves activate muscles so that you can use your muscles to move things or to even walk. And so the nerve sends messages to the brain, and the brain kind of is again the control center that interprets interprets the message.
Okay, so like if I touch a hot stove,
Yep,
my nerve in my finger sends a message to my brain that says hot danger, take your finger off. And so then my brain sends another message to move the finger. So it's a two-way highway.
exactly.
Okay, love it. I can relate to that. So the nervous system's main job then is really to protect us.
Yeah, it is. And it decides what's dangerous. The nerves don't decide, but the brain is your brain's very complex and pretty amazing. But yeah, it decides how to interpret that, the message it's getting, and protect whether I need to protect you. So when you touch the hot stove, should you remove your finger or just leave it on there and end up burnt?
Okay, so let's talk about that ankle injury. You talked about the sprained ankle being acute.
Hmm.
So if that sprained ankle as you were falling off a curb was something traumatic to your body, and your brain forms a snapshot of that as, ooh, this was a horrible experience, how is that going to affect how long pain stays around? Will that hinder or help your healing process?
Well, it can go either way sometimes.
Okay.
Um,
So let's talk about I think we all know what the good way is. The good way is your body goes, okay, this is temporary.
yeah,
I'm done with this. I'm healed. I can move on, and I'm using my ankle to walk again. No residual effects. But what about the pain that stays around long after we think it should be healed?
yeah. So uh, our even our pain experience, or when we have injuries, our nervous system that I'm talking about is affected by we our brain has memory and can remember previous experiences. So e- previous experiences and the stress or trauma we've had in our life affects our nervous system. And for some people, obviously people have different experiences, or I have worked with patients that have repeatedly sprained their ankle. And so each of those instances might come with its own memory. And what I'm saying is, um, say you're walking down the street and you roll your ankle on the curb and a bus is coming. Uh, your brain decides, do I need to get up and run? Or am I going to lay here while the bus is coming? Well, the brain usually decides that the bigger threat is the bus. And so you're able to get up and move um, and then kind of calm down and figure out that, or then your body draws attention to, oh, now my ankle hurts, that you can, we're gonna have to edit this out. Uh, but if you were to sprain your ankle, I'm going haywire on this. Edit out.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, anytime there's anything associated with a threat, the brain records that as such. And if you've had multiple injuries to an ankle, it might remember all those injuries and then start to set up a feedback loop where it's you're healed, but your nerves are still irritated, and the stress of that is making that loop be unbreakable.
Yeah, and y- like I said, our brain remembers, and so maybe a previous instant of an ankle sprain was very traumatic. Maybe it caused you to not be able to work and led down a path of financial stress. That, then there's that loop of I've got financial stress and now I've got anxiety, and that anxiety and even sometimes depression affects your nervous system.
So the body sends a false alarm to protect us rather than fail to protect us when something really dangerous is happening.
Right. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So if we're if we have a surgery, say, maybe we have a foot surgery and it doesn't go quite right. Maybe you had more done than expected, or you had problems with the tissue healing after, and you think about it as being a horrible negative experience. Does
Mhm.
that sometimes affect the amount of pain or continued pain that you could have?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so part of what I do in physical therapy is how can we reframe that experience and recognize, like, if I'm in this loop of being negative and very focused on, what's wrong with my foot and being angry about it, that doesn't help kind of the process of healing and improving the symptoms,
Ooh, I just heard you say that our emotions affect how we feel and interpret pain.
for sure. You want to talk about that, Deb?
Sure. Um, Gosh, where to start on that? I,
Yeah.
I think. For many years, we looked at the body as one thing and our mind as something else,
Yeah.
another thing, and we treated physical symptoms as physical symptoms and emotional symptoms as psychiatric symptoms. And the new research says it's all intertwined. The
Hmm.
body and the emotions are all, they're like a big jumble of yarn or a big ball of rubber bands that you stick together. They are not separate from each other. And when we feel an emotion, it changes the way information gets to our brain, and it also affects the nervous system in terms of our sensory perception, how we feel pain, how we experience pain, all of it. So we're no longer looking at things like that as separate entities, but as a mind-body connection.
Absolutely. We can't separate the two. Uh, they go hand in hand, exactly like you said. The good news that I kind of want to talk about is uh, what's encouraging is we can change our nervous system. And that's part of the purpose of, I think, our podcast is, you know, to provide you with tools and ideas or resources to find to help and change that nervous system. It's called neuroplasticity. It's the big fancy nerd term. Do you want to explain what that is, Deb?
Yeah, it means that our nervous system can be retrained to use different pathways. So if there's a an accident at one of the neural pathways that are running to the brain and back down, say that accident happened on the route with the ankle injury that we talked about, we can teach the brain to perceive differently and make a new neural pathway or a new communication pathway to bypass what we already have. So
Exactly.
that sounds crazy, but one of the easiest ways to do that is with the tool of reframing that Lindsay talked about and our breath. So it turns out that our nervous system is influenced by our emotions, and our emotions are first felt by our heart, not our brain, and that the brain sends more information. Oops, the heart sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. So if we are feeling really anxious about that pain and we choose a breath tool and a reframing tool, and we can get that signal to our brain, it will help us calm down. So it also helps other things in the body. Think about when you're tense, your heart rate increases, all of your vasculature, your blood vessels constrict. And so when that happens, it makes pain feel more intense because there's this whole chemical cascade that goes on in your body because your body thinks it's under threat. So it's sending all these things, these hormones to moderate that experience, and it can be influenced by breath and how you think about it.
Yeah, breathing is, it sounds like it should be simple, and it's it's a hard thing sometimes to do. And this reframing and being able to change the nervous system takes practice. It's no different than learning to play an instrument. Because some of us are wired a certain way, and I'm kind of a sensitive person, and I can be wired kind of high. And that is, I think, why I like this topic of helping people who are dealing with chronic illness, because we're wired a certain way, but you can um you can change your wiring a little bit through practice and practicing new patterns that maybe uh are calmer. And Deb, I like you talked about the kind of the physiological change. When we're stressed and anxious, you have you might have tight muscles and muscle tension. A lot of us carry it in our neck. It's called our upper trapezius muscles. And then that just can lead to a cascade of maybe neck pain or headaches. And you see again where you can get into a cycle. And so, coming back to what Deb was talking about, simple breathing can help relax muscles or help you be more mindful of where you're carrying your tension.
So, in my experience, it doesn't work to use the tools after you have an accelerated pain flare unless you've practiced that when you don't have it,
Hmm.
because it's hard for the brain to learn something new when it's already trying to defend its position of pain danger. So the key is learning to do breath tools throughout your day or as part of your day when you don't have a flare, and teach the body that this pathway needs to connect so that when it comes up, you're prepared. You use the breath tool and it helps you relax because your body doesn't see that as something new. It's like, oh yeah, when you did that, I felt really good and I could relax. So it worked then, it's going to work now. So you got to do a little bit of planning with some of this stuff. Same with reframing. I'm sorry, but when your ankle's killing you or when your knees are killing you, you're not thinking about how to get out of that. You have to have a backup plan beforehand and think about, when I have this pain, I'm going to tell myself that this is temporary. I'm going to use my breath. I'm going to relax. I'm going to have a different pain experience. The brain starts to get that message and it's not so hyper reactive to what's happening. And then things start to moderate and calm down. So, in our last podcast, Lindsay talked about this whole relationship between not wanting to move and knowing you need to move. Um, and that's how you kind of get through that. It's by doing that practice work so that when you get to the point that you have to make a decision, your body already knows and it's not going to go to that feedback loop and reinforce that.
Yeah, one of the things I talk with patients about is uh, gradually exposing our body to things, and that might be a 5-minute walk a day. And so doing a 5-minute walk a day, even though it's maybe a little uncomfortable or it doesn't feel good, with time and with practice, your body and the nervous system learns that, okay, I am safe. It might not feel good, but I'm safe and my alarm doesn't need to go off. And with time, the hope and often what can happen is you can gradually increase that walking time. Maybe you start with 5 minutes and the next you gradually increase to 10 minutes, and then that we provide graded exposure to the nervous system uh, to to rewire.
Yeah. And if you add a breath tool to that, it just helps to reinforce that positive feedback loop.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
So it's hard to teach breath tools on a podcast. So this particular episode will be uploaded to the YouTube channel, and you can find that YouTube channel at the handle Less Stress in Life. If you put that into YouTube, it'll pop up. And I'll actually go through and guide you on that breath tool. I mean, we can try it here. So, just starting to get your brain used to the idea of breathing, I use a technique called heart focused breathing. It comes from the heart math family of tools, and heart focused breathing goes like this. Focus your attention in the area of your heart. Imagine your breath flowing in and out of the center of your chest, middle of your heart, just breathing a little slower and deeper than usual. I like to refer to that as heart focus and heart breath. If you're used to breathing, doing belly breathing, this takes a little practice. And the way that I learned to do it was to put one hand on my belly and one hand on my heart. and focus on the weight of the heat of that hand on my heart. And I had a hard time learning how to do this. I am not ashamed to say that I didn't start adding this technique until about 6 years ago, and I was teaching stress management tools long before that. And it made a huge difference in my pain experience, and it works great, but I had to practice. So, starting with that may not be perfect the first time, but the more you learn how to do it, the easier it will come. And you get to the point where you can do that without having to think about it because your brain really does want to go to a point that it feels relaxed. It doesn't like to be in siege all the time, it likes to be relaxed. So we'll have that on the YouTube channel, and there will be a printout or a download that you can have the exercise with too. You can also Google heart math, heart focused breathing, lots of information out there. So there's tons and tons of use of this breath tool technique in many of the pain centers, like Scripps and Cleveland Clinic and Mayo. So this isn't something that's just made up, it's science backed, works awesome. And if you'd like more information about how to use those tools, you can reach out to one of us on the Less Stress in Life podcast page. There's a place to send a message to us, and we'd be happy to talk you through that in a little bit more um, length. Anything else you think we need to add to this particular podcast, Lindsay? We talked a lot about a lot of sciencey stuff today.
Yeah, it is. It's very complex, and Deb and I went to school for a long time to learn about this. So, we're gonna try our best to teach you in a little bit more layman's terms, so it's not so confusing. Um, Again, like Deb just talked about the breathing, I can relate. Like it's not an easy it's not an easy practice. So the more you practice, it does get easier. But I wanted to add, Deb, that we're going to include in the show notes kind of a visual of what we're talking about, like this nervous system pain cycle and kind of how it can show up in your body and the different stress hormones that can kind of contribute to this ongoing cycle that disrupts sleep and all the things. So we'll include that. Or if you want to just kind of Google pain cycle and look for images on the internet, that works too. There's a ton out there. Um, but I think our kind of as we close this, we want you to know that your body is not working against you, but it might be working overtime to protect you. And so kind of one of the take-home messages too that we'll continue to talk about is the goal isn't to keep fighting your symptoms, but we want you to help you understand them and be able to slowly teach your nervous system that it's safe to turn that volume down on the alarm.
Awesome. With that, we'll sign off and we'll see you next time.
All right. See you next week.